what's up, guys, and welcome back to another episode of the Cervantes Podcast. Happy Hispanic Heritage Month. Joining me today to discuss his decades-long career working in sports television behind the scenes at CBS Sports, UBS Arena, the Yes Network, and adjunct professor at Hofstra University is technical director for the New York Mets, Mr. Harold Garcia. How are you doing today, Mr. Garcia?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me, and welcome to the audience.
Awesome. Thank you for being here. I appreciate it. So, off camera, you told me that you didn't go the traditional route of majoring in television production, getting an internship, graduating, and going into the field. Can you share with us how you got your start?
Yeah, it's actually a really great story. Back when I was a young person, coming up and going to college and working, I worked and I went to school, and an opportunity presented itself at the New York Mets to be one of the operators of what was called the scoreboard back in, I would say, like 1990, 1991. And
Okay.
when you go back to that time period, it's before the really full-on advent of all the technology that we have. But they had a new technology that was controlling basically how the lights on the scoreboard were turned on and off, and how they were mapped, configured, and how we were even able to create some very basic animations. Essentially, that scoreboard was just incandescent light bulbs, and
Wow.
there was a company that had a lion's share of the market, relevant to what were the signs that were all in incandescent bulbs on Broadway. The marquees of the Broadway theaters were all in lights.
Right.
And so this company extended that to stadiums and arenas as well. And they uh, were the ones who upgraded the system to run on a kind of a real-time industrial robotics application that was used in manufacturing and in industrial applications. And they kind of retrofitted that application just to turn lights on and off on the board through a very basic computer program. So I know this is long-winded, but it's because that happened, because that particular incident, technology change happened, that I became of interest, and the opportunity presented itself at the Mets for me to go and train and learn how to operate that software. And that's how it began
Wow.
for me. You know, and the company at the time was a very famous company called White Way Sign. If you look
Okay.
them up on the internet, you'll see the history of that company and all the work they did. And excuse me. The reason that became important, because suddenly I'm in the in stadium. This is very important. I'm in the in stadium control room facility.
Right.
And those typically are forward facing control rooms, generally on like a press level or at some point, someplace in the stadium where you can look down on the field, whether it's football or hockey or baseball or basketball. But
Okay.
all things relevant to, their replays, their graphics, switching,
Right.
cameras, the entire production, as well as the scoreboard operation, is located in this room. And I wound up being there. And that's how it all began for me.
Did you major in like engineering? Were you when you were in undergrad? Like, did you always have a love for technical operations?
Um, that's another important distinction about me. It really didn't come as a result of engineering, or what we call STEM today.
Right.
Growing up, I was a pretty avid musician. I was very interested in music, specifically jazz and Latin jazz, and the study of that.
Wow.
And I began to accelerate as a flute player when I was young. And very early on, I got the opportunity to play here in the New York City area
Wow.
with some Latin jazz bands under a very famous management company called Ralph Mercado Management. And that
Wow. Okay.
organization had all of the contracts for all of the big nightclubs that played Latin music, Latin jazz in New York. What's the point? Why am I saying this? I'm saying this because I had to learn music theory. I had to master the technical aspects of the instrument. And then I had to know how to stand on a stage, work with other musicians, perform and entertain and be good. Back then, you couldn't, you had to be like, you had to know what you were doing. You
Right.
couldn't be, there was no technology to make you sound better, or there were no videos.
Right.
You really had to just work, practice, learn, study, work with other musicians, and then go out there and play and be great at it. And at the time that I did that, the portfolio of musicians in the New York area at that time was stellar. I mean, Miles Davis was still here, Freddie Hubbard was still here. On the
Classic.
Latin music side, Tito Puente was still here. All the great Latin musicians
Legends.
of the time, all the legends. Dizzy Gillespie was still on the scene.
Wow.
And I was a young cat. I used to play at the Village Gate on Monday nights, and I would intersect with all these musicians. So how does this turn into me being a technical director? Well, while it's not the traditional route of majoring in RTBF and working on productions and learning all the equipment, I'm on stage with audio engineers and lighting directors and television cameras. And a lot of times things that I performed in were televised. And there was the whole construct of what you see in the study of television right in front of me, and all things relevant to making all those systems work and faxing them, making sure I was always around all of them. And so that was really how my curiosity became piqued. And when the opportunity came at the Mets, I really understood what it was to deal with the production aspects, the entertainment aspects, and then the execution aspects of what it takes to be on the television side. And so those things led me to becoming very serious about mastering the technology that ran the scoreboard at the time, and I did. And the vendor, the equipment manufacturer, really came to depend on me to troubleshoot the systems for them, because they felt that I was developing a very deep knowledge of how their systems work. And so I changed the perception of who I was, not only to the Mets, but on a technology side to the vendor who is the one who provided this equipment. And at that point, I would say I realized the significance of engineering, and that it's really about the engineering. On the
Yeah.
production side is another very important component, but on the engineering side, you can't have a production without really understanding the engineering construct of all things audio, video, today now metadata, lighting, all of that. So, because the owners of sports franchises never really did the capital expenditure on these control rooms, in stadium control rooms, that television did. The education is different, right? So if you're working at the network television level, you're going to be exposed to different equipment, different process, different knowledge base, different expectation, different execution than on the stadium side. And so after maybe 4 years of running that scoreboard system, I got an opportunity to go work at the US Open at the tennis center.
Wow.
And my role there was to be the tech in charge of the in-stadium closed circuit TV system. So they had an internal TV system, and what it meant was during tennis, everybody would have a TV, whether you were in the locker rooms, in your office, wherever you were, there was a TV, and that TV had a specific channel lineup that covered all of the courts, all of the matches. It fed network TV and some specific in stadium related content that they needed. And I learned how to work with those systems. They were modulators, RF modulators that I had to uh, line up and make a channel schedule and feed signals into them to create the channel lineup.
Wow.
The reason this story is important, right? Because you asked me, Harry, how did you get into this? Is
Right.
that the hop from the Mets to the US Open, running the closed circuit TV system, it put me in direct contact with CBS Sports, because CBS would give my room a feed. They would give me like 17 individual feeds. Each of those feeds was a court that they were covering. And so now I had to communicate, integrate, and work with their engineer to make sure I had all those feeds and signals and they were working properly. So now my education now exponentially jumps higher, because now I have to understand something that I didn't work with before. And this is what I teach a lot of my students. At that point, I learned to build relationships, because I
Networking.
realize networking. I realize that this is important knowledge in order for me to move forward. And I build a relationship, and in doing so, I not only service the US Open, but I make sure that the experience CBS technicians have with me is stellar. So when they walk away, they go, you know what, that guy down there, man, that guy was on point, man. He made a little sheet, he had everything lined up, he understood where things went, and that became a behavior that I began to duplicate and emulate and build upon. And so what happened, to cut the story down a little bit, was that I wound up being in that role for tennis for quite a few years.
Okay.
And in that process, the Mets decided to move me from being a scoreboard operator to running a little small switcher that was connected to their video board in left field. And it's funny, that was called an Ampex Vista switcher. It's a very old switcher. So I did a presentation on this at the IDEA conference this past summer in Austin, Texas.
Oh, nice.
So that
Okay.
so that transition happens for me. And I moved from scoreboard to operating this really tiny switcher, just a couple of sources, 2 keyers. I'm like, what the heck is this? How does this work? And I get into that. And at the same time, when tennis comes, I jump over to do what I'm doing. Well, what happens? I get to see the production trucks that CBS uses. And the engineers that knew me said, Harry, why don't you come and take? I said, yeah, I'm starting to do this switching thing over at the Mets. He said, oh, really? Come on in. Let me show you what this is all about.
Wow.
And that was it.
Wow.
That's how it happened for me. I know that's not the way things work today,
Right.
because we're in a different time. But back when I was young, if you carried yourself in a way and you organized yourself in a way that was meaningful and people took note of, they liked that, and I got taken in to see what I had. I mean, it blew my mind. I
Like, you
walked
didn't
into this
need a
production.
degree, you didn't need an internship, a fellowship. You didn't need any of that back then. That's so true. That's so true.
Didn't need it, just needed the right attitude, the willingness to understand that you didn't understand, the ability to listen, and not get ahead of the moment. Stay within the moment and not jump to it. I want to make $150,000 next week. Show me how to push this button. That wasn't the way it was back then. You had
Right.
to
You gotta work
earn.
your way, you gotta work your way up. And that's so true, because I feel like now sometimes it's funny that you say that. Now sometimes I'll meet producers at ABC News who don't understand. Like, I'm a digitizer at ABC News, and there's producers who are like, "Oh, can we get this 3-hour footage ingested into the system in 2 minutes? Can you do that for me?" And it's like, no, it doesn't work like that. And I feel like it's a lot of times the how do I say it? The leadership people, the people who are the leaders, they don't understand how the little guys, they don't understand what we do. And I think it's because a lot of them went from school straight to producer, or school straight to AP, then produce. Like, they didn't really work their way up. So I feel like people there, you can see the difference between people who did work their way up and understand all levels of production, rather just tunnel vision on what they want to do, and that's it. Like you can see the difference for sure.
And it's important that you share that with your audience who's listening today, and that you make that distinction, because there's an important behavior that is important to discuss in the world of production, whether you land on the tech side, engineering, or on the production side, how the shows are going to be put together and go out on the air, or if you're on the management side, the administration side of television. There's important behavior that accelerates the efficiency of what you're doing, because at the end of the day, what matters is that the show goes out. That
Exactly.
on the administration side, all the I's were dotted, all the T's were crossed, so that technical can do what it has to do, so production, it has to do what it has to do, because they're selling this. And
It's a
so you're
business.
selling a product. It's a business. And the qualitative component of each person's behavioral understanding of what is the expectation of me? They're paying me. What is the expectation? What am I supposed to deliver 100% of the time with excellence? And I learned that because I was so humbled by what I saw, the impact of what I saw when I first walked into a state-of-the-art production truck covering a live US Open tennis match, feeding the entire world. As I looked at the people sitting there doing that across all of these parts of it, I was humbled. I mean, it humbled me. And
Right.
not that I was an over-the-top person with my personality. I was a pretty quiet, nice guy. But internally, inside of myself, I had a tremendous amount of respect for what I was seeing. I said, wow, I never knew any of this existed this way.
And they're doing all of it in a truck, not even in a
In
studio.
multiple trucks. Yeah,
Multiple
they
trucks.
had multiple trucks. Yeah.
Do you have a favorite memory or two from over the years, working as a TD for the Mets?
Man, I have so many memories that are really about moments. They're moments. And probably, the reason that this is another important question is because you're very fortunate when you work in this business to be part of the architectural team that illuminates a moment. And one of the great moments I had as a TD was when we first came back to play baseball after 9/11. The first baseball game, I was the TD over at Shea Stadium.
Wow.
And it was very emotional. It was, the entire nation was watching us, if not the world. And I was a part of that, even though nobody knew who I was or knew my name, but I was there. And in my lifetime, that's a big moment, because that was, such a significant statement to the world that we are the USA and we're going to play ball. And you're going to watch us play ball in spite of this thing that you've done, because we're still the good old USA. With all of the problems of everything, it didn't matter. And I felt that. I felt the power of that deep inside of myself, because I am an American. And that TDing led me to be in the moment to experience that. Right? You don't realize how things are going to put you in a scenario that you never imagined. I never imagined in my life that I would be part of that moment.
In
The
history.
world was watching history, and everybody was there. The president was there,
Oh
and
wow.
you know,
Okay.
the president of the United States came, and like it was a big, huge thing, and I will never forget that. That has to be. I mean, obviously, I did the World Series, and I did All-Star games, and I did postseason games, but that was probably the biggest one for me.
That's such a big moment. Like we haven't had such a significant moment. I think the only thing that kind of comes close is maybe COVID, but it's a little bit different. But that's a major moment in history. And you may not be famous, no one, people may not know, the audience at home watching didn't know that it was you TDing, but like you felt that, and that's a personal historic moment for you. So I love that. That's awesome. It's a
I would
sad day,
encourage.
but it's
I'm
also
sorry.
like, no, I was gonna say it's a sad day, it's a sad moment in time, but it's also kind of like an accomplishment for you at the same time, because sports is seen as escapism. So people, I'm sure many people tuned in because they were so sad and they wanted to not watch the news, they wanted to watch just a baseball game with their family. So I completely understand that.
You absolutely described that perfectly. And you cannot imagine the emotion. You can't imagine the emotion, you know? I mean, it's still
It's
something
pressure.
that, it still gets to me because, we watched a very, very awful thing happen in New York. And, to add to it, I actually watched the towers go down. I was in Manhattan on the West Side, and I saw it from my eyes.
Not even
You
on
know,
TV, like you actually
I didn't watch it
saw.
on TV. I actually watched it happen. I watched the second plane go in. I watched those towers collapse. So, like that, and I know this is about TDing, but like, the impact of that, and then the significance of, because I'm working in baseball. Baseball is a very, very important statement for Americana, culture of America.
Yeah.
It's one of those iconic American sports that speaks to so many fundamental ideas and philosophies about what America is. And so to have baseball be the voice that comes out of the rubble, and for me to be there, the emotion was so tremendous. So when you're working in that environment, like, oh no, go back to production, let's get back to, you know, how that impacts you. Now I'm TDing. Now my emotional sense, my historical sense, the sense of the moment is completely deposited in every button push, in every camera choice, in every dissolve, in every activity that delivers an image to the screen. All of those things have a completely different emotional impact, right? The reason why we go to this camera, the reason why we go to the close up, the reason why we do a slow dissolve off of the flag in that moment, right? And so coming from my background of being on stage and playing music and being in front of audiences, it really like connected with me, the thing of TDing. All of a sudden, I understood why this was meaningful to me.
It was
I
like a
was a
full
musician,
circle.
a full circle, right? And I played the flute. It was all about pressing buttons. And, the flute is transverse. You can't see it, when you're playing it. And I spent years developing those pathways in my brain.
To be able to
And so,
play.
yeah, right. And what we call neuroplasticity, the rewiring of the brain when it learns something new. TDing is all about neuroplasticity. It's a very sophisticated thing that happens in the brain. The best TDs, the top TDs in the business, they have amazing, amazing organizational skills, planning skills, execution skills, problem solving skills, troubleshooting skills, all live in the moment. They know how to do all of that.
Because again, and
And
also too, it's live television. So you you cannot make a mistake. There's no time to edit. Oh, can we do this again? The lighting. Oh, I don't like how I look. You can't do that with live television. You have to be perfect. And in that moment, you really had to be perfect and not mess up. Have you met any athletes from any of the networks you have worked for? And do you have a favorite interaction?
I actually I met a few athletes and a few celebrities. Um,
Okay.
and typically I didn't meet them like in the hallway. They all wound up coming up to our control room,
Oh, nice. Okay.
and because the director, especially at the Mets, he has to produce all kinds of pieces that are directed by marketing and sponsorship and entertainment related pieces. So the director has to engage with the players. They have to allocate time for him, and that relationship is built. And ultimately, some of the players, they really enjoyed it, and they came up to the control room to hang out with us. So who did I meet? I met Dwight Gooden. I met Mike Piazza. I met John Franco, Al Leiter, Ron Darling, Keith Hernandez.
Okay.
I met and many, many more. There was a very famous song trio from many, many years ago, way before your time, way
Okay.
before your time, called Tony, Orlando, and Dawn. And they had a
Okay.
famous song called Tie a Yellow Ribbon Around the Olo Tree. Well, Tony Orlando wound up coming in. There was also a famous pop music group had a TV show called The Monkees. And the drummer for the Monkees, his name was Mickey Dolenz.
Mickey
Mickey
Dolan.
Dolenz wound up coming up to the control room. He was into television production. He sat with me at the switcher. You know, I was a
Wow.
kid watching his show on TV as a little kid. I'm watching the Monkees on TV. They were like a British rock group. You know, they had a lot of these shows for us. And all of a sudden, I have this man sitting there. I'm like, I can't believe it. I can't believe it.
That's amazing. That's
Things that
amazing.
happen, things that happen as a result of getting into this that I would have never imagined. So those are probably the biggest encounters were those guys I mentioned.
That's awesome. Are you and your family big baseball fans or sports people?
Yeah, actually, my father um, uh, was raised in a town on the southern coast of Puerto Rico called Guayama.
Okay. I haven't been there. I haven't been there.
Yeah, and my father was an amazing baseball player, and his you know his brother, and when I use the word brother, I use it in the context of my father grew up next door to a family that had 5 children. And my dad was uh, really kind of taken completely in by that family. Like he was in that house every day. And
Wow.
one of those siblings became so close with my father, I called him my uncle. My father said, "This is your uncle, this is my brother, it doesn't matter." Relevant to your question, I just like to make things clear because sometimes you never know. Maybe one of his children watched this and, oh, you didn't explain it properly.
No, yeah, giving
But
context is good. I like it. I like it.
yes, so that brother of his, who grew up next door to him, he wound up pitching for the New York Giants, and he pitched Game 3 of the 1954 World Series, and he won Game 3. And he became the first Puerto Rican pitcher in the history of Major League Baseball to win as a pitcher a World Series game. And on
Wow.
his team was Willie Mays, the manager was Leo DeRocha, all the iconic baseball players from the 50s, of which many of them were on the New York Giants. And the Giants at the time were not in San Francisco.
Oh
And
wow.
so,
Okay.
as you asked me the question about my family and baseball was it. And there were baseball players constantly in the house. Everything was baseball growing up in my house. And my dad was, he could have been a professional baseball player, but he chose a different direction. He became a soldier, got married, had kids, but we were baseball. Everything was baseball.
I love that. That's awesome. That's awesome. What do you love most about technical directing?
I think, like the advent of what today's technology, the tools that I'm working with today are literally mind-boggling. When I started in 1989, when I look at the tools I had to put images on the screen and put on what we call a lower third, keyable graphic, that
Okay.
was one thing. But the technology of today is absolutely amazing. I work with the Grass Valley Cayenne XP switcher, which basically it's a switcher that has the capacity to connect on a network. And there's a new network called the SMPTE 2110 network. And basically it's an IP-based switcher. So instead of transporting audio, video, and metadata in baseband, in traditional HDSDI mode, we're now transporting audio, video, metadata, doing timing and syncing and communication and where
Wow.
to go, where to come back. When I push a button, it knows to go to this machine, back to the time the audio and the video. We're all doing that as an IT operation now. Now
That's
it's an
incredible.
IT function. Yeah.
That's incredible.
And so if you ask me today, the architects who design these systems, the people who sit and draft up and draw up these switches, this technology, and are literally right now planning the next iteration of these things, they're dealing with the increased capacity of our computational processing power, which allows them to make more and more robust products that do many, many more things. That's what I really love about TDing today. It's the new way of how you TD and the power of the switchers. The switchers are incredibly powerful, but you really have to know a lot more. It also
Okay.
it demands I have to learn now a lot more about network engineering. I have to understand about how this is transported out of my switcher to another piece of equipment that's also SIMD 2110. So it's now not just mapping a keyer, a font machine to a keyer and cutting a camera and doing a replay wipe. It's understanding how the system really works and how these networks are integrated and how you connect them, test them, make sure they're doing what they're supposed to do.
Because the goal is for it to be, I think the goal for any piece of technology is for it to become more and more efficient. Like new iPhone supposed to be better, new MacBook supposed to be better, new switcher supposed to be, each switcher supposed to be even better. I thought though, maybe this is a little ignorant, but I thought that the more advanced, the less you would have to know. But I guess maybe it's different. Like I feel like with an iPhone, it's so advanced, but it's very like user friendly. Like I feel like anybody could really learn it. Whereas
No, that's a beautiful point. That's
yeah,
a beautiful, very, very, very beautiful distinction. And I want to just bring some illumination to what you're saying. The beautiful thing about the iPhone, or any phone for that matter, is that you text using the technology that allows you as the user experience, to open up the application and you text or you call or you engage with all the different applications, right? And you do those things and it happens.
right,
But what you're not seeing is all the engineering on the back end of that allows you to do that. See, you don't see how complex it is when you type, "Hey, Jack, what are you doing tonight? You want to go out and grab something to eat?" And you hit send. All you're doing is hitting send. You don't really see everything else that had to happen for that signal to get from your phone to his phone. You don't see that.
right,
Well, with the technology that the switchers have today, you have to know how to do that back end a little bit more. Not all of it, right? Because it's not entirely sitting on your lap, right? Because the designers have a level of creating the software and the applications that exceed what I'm supposed to know as a TD. But going into a switcher that's blank and has nothing in it, it has to connect to a network, there's a lot more that I have to know about how to make that work that's not traditional for a TD based on these new networks.
right, right. You have to have a higher level understanding. Like you already have the basic concept, and now with each switcher, you have to learn a little bit more. That's true. That's very true.
Because we're moving away, we're moving into the world of connecting everything through IT. That's what's coming. That's here. We do it at the Mets. We do it at UBS Arena. A variety of facilities across the country are doing this. And more of this is what's going to take over.
That's the new wave that's approaching.
It's the new wave. The next 10 years is going to be all about this.
That's so interesting. That's so interesting. What is the most challenging part about technical directing and directing in general?
So I want to make a distinction here again. Technical directors on the broadcast side face a more arduous task to get their show built into the switcher and then to execute the show as it's being called by the director. The broadcast TDs today have a monumental amount of programming that's required into the switcher for what you see on TV to happen. you watch Monday Night Football, you see the camera cuts, you see the replay wipes, you see the 2 and the 3
Graphics.
boxes, you see there's it's hours and hours and hours and of building those shows into those switchers and making sure they work right. Now they could save their configurations, but oftentimes, what people don't know is there are slight variations. You might be in a truck that has a completely different type of switcher than the one you were using the week before, or there's a different routing system, or there are quirks and little details. And suddenly, as the TD, you have the pressure of, I have X amount of time to build this show and get this working properly, work with engineering, because pre-production is going to start at this time, and then we go on the air.
Yep.
And then we go on the air. And if you're not ready, the director doesn't care how you get it on the air.
Just get it
He
on.
just wants to know that it's a clean show.
Yep.
He wants to see a clean, mistake-free delivery of everything at the speed that they call the show. So,
And every director is
I
different.
mean, every director is different.
Yeah.
It really behooves everybody to understand the genius of all of the broadcast TDs in the industry. These people are geniuses, and it's hard-fought knowledge, because the knowledge that they've acquired comes from many, many, many years of being in those trucks and in studios and building shows from scratch, making mistakes, finding out the detail of the switchers that is not the surface level engagement. And they build and amass this knowledge. And when they spend 10, 20, 30 years doing this, the amount of things that they know is so huge, you really can't put a price on it. And so oftentimes TDs who are at that level, they don't like to tell you anything. And the
Oh,
reason
okay.
they don't want to tell you is because they just spent 25 or 30 years of their life figuring out how to do this. And what do you want to do? You want to go from 1 to 10.
Yep.
Remember 1 to 10?
Yep. Going back earlier to our conversation.
Go
Yep.
back
That's so
early.
true. That's so
And
true.
I
So a lot of
respect,
times they gatekeep. They don't
they
want to
gatekeep.
teach. Yeah.
And it's not wrong. I agree with it, because they want you to go from step 1 to step 2 to step 3 to step 4. The idea of going from 1 to 10, which is sometimes in the minds of people, it doesn't allow you to matriculate a deeper knowledge. And if you don't matriculate that deeper knowledge and get those experiences, something's going to present itself to you when you're live on the air, and you're not going to know what to do because you never saw it before.
Yeah.
So it's a very serious thing to be a TD, in any capacity. But the broadcast, much higher requirement. Stadium side, very high now, because we're doing these IT-based control rooms. $60-70 million control rooms are being installed. Very complicated. It's a serious thing, and it has to be treated that way. And your level of understanding, you have to identify. You have to identify. How much do I know about patching my getting all my resources into the switcher? What cameras, graphics machines I'm going to put in? How I'm going to allocate the real estate of the switcher? What am I going to do on ME1, ME2, ME3? Okay, I got to build these replay templates. Let me build these replays. How am I doing it? I'm using EMEMs and macros. All right, let me build an EMEM template. Okay, let me duplicate this 50 times because I have 50 different types of replays. Okay, and then I got to test and troubleshoot and make sure. Okay, then I have these other things I have to build. Then I have to name everything. Then I have to organize this. Then I have to know what production is doing. Let me build a spreadsheet that explains to me all the effects I've built, all the resources. Let me save it on a thumb drive. So I have, it's a very, very serious organizational exercise. And like I said, I really want to share with your audience the utmost respect for technical directors who go from show to show, from sport to sport, around the clock. Yeah, you develop familiarity and you become great at it over time, but it takes time.
It takes work, because you have to be so quick. You can't lollygag. You can't wait. You have to be very, very quick. And I think that's why in school, when we would rotate between different positions in production, like the different crew positions, I was always scared of TDing because I knew how serious it
It's
was.
terrifying.
It's scary, but I wish I practiced more, because that's where I should have messed up. That's where I should have practiced. That's where I should have, not when I'm, at ABC or whatever. School is where I should have practiced. But what you just said, that's why TD, it felt so daunting. Every other position, I was like, oh, I could try camera, I could try graphics. Let me try this. But like TD and maybe like audio, those were the two that like really, really scared me.
They're terrifying because, you know,
You're in
it's not only
charge.
you're pushing the buttons, and if nobody knows how the thing works, if something goes wrong, or they ask for something, hey, we want to do this. That's the thing about the TD position. You really have to understand what it requires. What are the requirements to become a TD? And that's why so many of the requirements today, if you go on like LinkedIn or any of the sports production jobs, you'll see that they want, at least 5 years of experience, and, all this engineering stuff. And the requirements are steep because
Right.
you have to be able to do all of those things. And there could never be a situation where you say, well, I don't know how to do that.
You can't, yeah,
It
you
can't
can't
happen.
say that. You can't say that. There's millions of dollars on the line. That's so true. That's so true.
Yeah.
Were
Your
you ever
competence is important.
confident? Yeah, confidence and knowledge. Were you ever interested in pursuing another position in television production?
I used to love, very early on, I got into the prosumer editing, video editing systems. And I love video editing, not so much because of the video editing, but it was the storytelling. And so being like a content creator, or more on the production side of, let's tell this story with this human emotion, and let's transport the audience from how this went from this scenario to this scenario to this scenario, and leave the people with something. you know I dug that too.
Okay.
And I did some editing, and I love, like feature production. Like, you ever watch like the 30 for 30 episodes of on ESPN? Amazing storytelling.
Yes.
Amazing, right? And I got to hang around some of the best feature producers at CBS. I worked at CBS Sports for like 10 years.
Yes.
And again, that was another craft, another skill, another special ability, another amount of deep research, understanding, writing, and you're like a film director. You got to be like a mini Spielberg.
Right.
So I liked that a lot. It tapped into something on my emotional construct side. My humanity is a big part of me. And I felt that that role would allow me to exercise the humanity in me through stories of other people. And that was very interesting. I didn't ultimately become that, but that did interest me.
Right. Making people feel something with your work.
Yes.
You have been teaching at Hofstra University for the past 4 years now, almost 5. On LinkedIn, you said once, you can teach a student a lesson for a day, but if you can teach them to learn by creating curiosity, they will continue the learning process as long as they live. What do you love most about teaching?
Um, you know, I love taking away the mystery of learning something. Specific to being a technical director, there's a lot of mystery associated with, how does this thing work? How do you become a TD? What do I need to know? What is this thing on the switcher? And I love pulling back the veil on that and bringing illumination to that. Let me show you how it works. It's really just being exposed to it. And that's very rewarding for me, because like I said, many years ago, it was hard to get like like a little knowledge out of a TD, man. It was like,
Right, right.
it
They
was,
didn't want to
it was
share.
just, no, no. And I understand it. I'm not angry at that. When you're young, you get angry because you don't understand. And when you get older, you understand. A person deposited his whole life. It's his knowledge,
And
just
then
doesn't
this
want to.
person's gonna learn in one semester.
Yeah, yeah. Like, so relevant to me teaching, I get to openly just share everything and give that perspective and then actualize skill development at the TD position very quickly to gain the curiosity component of the student, ignite that so that they really want to learn more and go deeper into this, as opposed to just seeing the switcher as a scary machine. So
Right.
if I could ignite your curiosity, show you how to work it, and then see you actualize doing things on the switcher that you didn't know how to do before, and then you go, man, I want to do more, then I feel victorious
Right. And
because I've revealed something that you didn't know about.
right. And showing the students that like it's difficult, but you can do it. Like it is gonna be a difficult job if you do end up pursuing that as a career, but you can do it. Like it's not the end of the world. It's not it may feel like neurosurgery, but it's not.
It's
Right.
not, and everything happens at a level, right? You're not going to go from graduating as an RTVF major to Monday Night Football.
No.
That happens. That's a 1 to 10. That's a 1 to 20. Yeah,
Right.
that's not going to happen. It'll happen in stages. But if I take away the fear and I open up your curiosity, you'll go into the world going, hey, I want to do more with this, as opposed to, oh my God, I don't want to mess with that. That's terrifying. And that's the goal of my teaching. It's to create the possibility that you can really become a TD.
Right. And I know Maddie Perkins, a former student of yours, and I see that you brought her to brought her to the switcher at the New York Mets. Why is mentorship so important for you?
I think because we're at an inflection point with technology, access to the latest and greatest tools are not often available in every learning environment. The best and most important significant technology tools are generally, like I said, either at the network level or the owners of sports franchises or like things that generate a profit. So mentorship is important because if I expose you to a piece of equipment that costs $600,000 and I let you sit there and push buttons on it and engage with it, that also is going to make an impression on you in your confidence. And I think that type of mentorship is meaningful because you really want to put people in the thing that actually is being used, as
Yes.
opposed to down the road, a few years from now, you'll learn on what is available. And then down the road, you'll get to the real things. My thing is, if I can get you to the real thing now, I've eliminated the mystery.
Right.
And that puts you in a different mindset instantly. That you're like, oh, that's what it is. Oh, look at it. Here's that thing. That's how it works. I can try it. Yeah, try it. Let me show you how to use it. And I do that as much as possible with my students because I think that's invaluable today. It's just giving people, respect for their intellect, for their brain power, for their capacity. You want to feed that and turn that on. You don't really want to curtail that and make it linger and wait.
What advice, just a couple more questions. I know you got to go soon. What advice would you give to college students who just graduated and are trying to get into the industry, especially in sports, or maybe just anybody, not just college students?
There's a huge need for all of you because the industry is aging out. And as the industry ages out, they need young, confident people who are willing to espouse these values. Heard everything I just said? They want people who have these values. One of the biggest problems employers run into is, and not in every case, this is not an ad hominem argument. I mean, you can't take from the part and spread it to the whole. In certain instances, some people don't have the work idea that employers want. Like, let's talk about what the expectation is for what I'm paying you for for your work, and what am I getting out of you in terms of productive output for what I'm paying, right? And so we have to understand what those expectations are, right? As a young person going into the world of work today, bust your butt, hustle, don't sit back, get off the phone. There's nothing to do, ask, hey, how can I help over here? There's something I could do over there. Let me help you with that. Introduce yourself. Hi, how are you? Nice to meet you. I'm new here. Can you tell me a little bit about what you do here? I'm learning. Make yourself amenable, accessible, and believe in yourself. Have confidence, but respect. It's important that you have respect for the institution, for the
For
people
your
that are there,
elders.
for how you carry yourself, for how you speak. Those things are fundamental, basic things that young people today should carry so that their career moves forward with something that we valued when I was growing up. It's my father's last name I have on my back. I'm representing my father, my family, my mom and my dad. When I walk out that door, I don't want to tarnish my last name that my father and my mother gave me. I want to do a good job, and I want to be respected because I got out of the way of my attitudes or things that got into my head. Later for that, I'm my mom and my dad's son. They busted their butt for me to get an opportunity. Nothing was handed to them. They worked hard. I got to carry that in my head when I walk out the door so that I'm building on what they did, so that your children build on what you do, and their children build, and their children build. And that's how you make it.
I love that. Since it is Hispanic Heritage Month, what do you love most about being Latino?
I think the thing I love most about being Latino is historically understanding the story of what it is, composition wise, to be this thing called Latino. And I think that has always sparked my pride and my joy in being Latino, because I understood that what Latino really meant was a relationship with colonialism, in my case, and the movement of people in and out of territories that were colonialized by European empires. And the story of that is significant because I'm a product of all that happened, all that went good, all that went bad, all that went sideways, all of whatever happened. I am just a product of what happened with all of that, right? And so, I'm born and raised in New York, but of course of Puerto Rican ancestry. And so I translated the word Puerto Rico as you asked me about what do I like about being Latino. And Puerto Rico means rich port.
Yep.
Right? It means rich port. And I'm like, oh, wow, that's beautiful. The island was a rich port. The significance of the island was not only that it was militaristically strategic because it sat in a position that was the entrance of what is that region of where the Antilles, the Greater and Lesser Antilles are, but there was an abundance of gold. And so the natural order of what I am Latino, but what is the land that I come from, that I'm deposited from? Wow, it's really more than being Latino. It's the story of this land and how its natural features were observed by the world as being so significantly beautiful. Puerto Rico was a gem. I come from a place that was gorgeous, that was scenically beautiful, that filled people with wonderment, and they would look at this place. And I come from there. I'm Latino from there. That's what it means
Beautiful.
to me. That I have something to be proud about because the natural order of the land was stunning to whoever came from whatever part of the world.
I love that. I love that. And now for some, so we call it the TCP rapid fire questions. 5 questions I'm going to ask you. You don't have to answer them quickly. I just call it that. But the first question is, what makes you laugh the most?
What makes me laugh the most? I think a lot of the silly stuff I see on social media with people doing things with their dogs or falling down or fails or just human things that happen in the course of everyday human life that are funny. I love to watch those things on whether it's YouTube or Facebook. I laugh all by myself all night long. I sound like a madman watching those things.
Those are good. Those are good. 3 things that you're grateful for.
Uh, Grateful for my parents. Grateful for the community that I come from. And grateful for my children.
Awesome. What would you tell your younger self?
Don't be afraid.
Nice. Where do you see yourself in 5 years?
On a boat, drinking a margarita,
Nice.
retired.
And the last question, what would you name this current chapter of your life?
The wonder years.
Ooh, I like that. I like that. Okay. Thank you so much for your time, Mr. Garcia. I really appreciate it. Where can everyone follow you or connect with you?
I don't really have like an Instagram or anything like that. Well, I think probably just you can find me on LinkedIn, and I
Okay.
do some posting on LinkedIn. Look me up there, and you can hit me up there, and that would be the best place to find me. It's where all the employers find me, and everybody who's looking for Harry Garcia, you find me on LinkedIn. I do have a Facebook page too. I really don't. It's nothing that fancy, but I do have a second page on Facebook called Jazz Horns because I'm a huge jazz fan. So those would be the places.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you guys for watching.
Bye-bye.
And I want to hear from you guys. So if you're listening to this episode right now on a podcast platform, be sure to leave a rating on Anchor, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. If you're watching this episode on YouTube, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And make sure you click the notification bell up top so you're notified whenever I upload a new episode. Thank you guys for listening. Have a good one.